Hello, class. I hope you are enjoying the snow day, and I thought the perfect thing for being trapped in the house on a snow day is to look at APA style and referencing. What could be better with a cup of hot cocoa, perhaps your cat around your feet, than looking over APA style? So for the class, I have a resource guide that is up on Blackboard. I suggest that you print it out and use it as a reference tool. If you find that the guide doesn't have every instance or answer all your questions about referencing, you can go to the original source, and that is the full writing guide on the University of Wisconsin-Madison's website. So it has many more pieces of information about APA referencing and APA style. So if you find a question that you have isn't answered by the shorter version of the guide I've put up, you can go to the full handbook. So when you are getting your reference page ready, there's different components to a reference that are important to know. So if you're citing an article that has only one author, and I've chosen an article that I wrote because it's awesome, and when you are doing the reference, the first thing that you need is the author's last name, and we don't use first names and middle names, we use initials. So in this case, the initial of the first name and the initial of the middle name. If the author does not have a middle name, then you would just skip this. If there was no middle name, it would just say Raposa, comma, K. After you put the name or names of the author, you put the date of the publication in parentheses followed by a period. So in this case, 2007, period. The next part of the citation is the title. Oops, sorry about that, is the title. So if you look at the title, the first word is capitalized, implicit. But if you look, all the other words are in small caps, except for here you have European American. So anything that isn't a proper noun, United States, Caucasian, Hispanic, European American, St. Paul, New York City, those things will all remain in capitals in a title because they're proper nouns, but otherwise only the first word is capitalized, all other words are in small caps. Unless you had a semicolon, in which case you would capitalize after the semicolon and go back to using small caps thereafter. So the title of the article, and then it's followed by the title of the journal. In this case, it's the Journal of Elder Abuse and Neglect. You can see that all of the words are capitalized except for words like prepositions and conjunctions and things like that, articles. So of, the, but, and, those words would not be capitalized, but all of the other words are capitalized. And also, the title of the journal is in italics. So you put it in italics. After the title of the journal, a comma, then the volume number. In this case, it has a subvolume, 2-3. So you put the volume number, if it has a subvolume, the subvolume, comma, and then the page span of the article. In this case, 17-32, followed by a period. So the whole citation ends with a period. And be sure that you indent, after the first line, you indent over to the right. A citation with two or more authors pretty much is cited in much the same way. The only difference is you will have an ampersand between the first and the second author in this case. There's two authors. You can see everything else is the same, capitalizing the first letter of the title, everything else in small caps. Journal of Personality and Social Psychology, capitalized and italicized. The volume and subvolume number, page span. If you have more than two authors, it's pretty much done just the same, except that the ampersand now comes before the last author. So in this case, it's Raposa, Cook, Zaveri, and ampersand Malley Morrison. And then the citation looks pretty much just the same. If you want to save some time on your citations, you can use a feature in Google Scholar. However, I think it's important to understand how a citation works and the components of citations because Google Scholar does not always give it to you in exactly the correct format, but it is quick. You just have to know what parts to correct. So here we're going to take a little side trip to Google Scholar, and we will find the article that we just looked at, so the Raposa, Cook, Saveri, and Malley Morrison. So with Google Scholar, you'll see that there's this little Cite tab over here. If you click it, it gives you the citation in MLA, APA, Chicago, Harvard, Vancouver. What we're interested in is this citation in APA style, so that's this right here. And you can right-click copy, and then you can paste it into your reference page. Of course, you have to make sure you indent to the right, and you have to look it over because, as I said, it doesn't always give you the information exactly and correctly. So if we look here, we can kind of see the mistake. Journal of Family Issues should be capitalized, and it is not. So you would have to know that the journal has to be all in caps to know that that's a mistake in the way the software in Google is doing that. But that said, it saves you a lot of time in typing out the whole citation. You can, do a lot more quickly, but you have to know how to correct the mistakes with Google Scholar. So how to cite references in text. It's important to cite information that you have, sort of obtained through reading other people's studies or sources. If you don't cite the information, that is ideas or direct wording, it becomes plagiarism. So better to cite too much and too often than not to cite enough. So how to cite references in text. There's two basic ways that we can cite information, and how you cite a study depends on how you're going to be using the information in your paper. If you just want to cite facts and findings and have a whole bunch of facts and findings cited very quickly so the paper kind of moves along and you're just focused on what particular outcomes were found by different studies, you would use an information-focused type of citation. In this case, the name of the authors and date go within the parentheses, and often it comes at the end of the sentence. So you use an ampersand between names of more than one author, or towards the last author if there's three or more. An example of this would be, generally studies found memory to be hampered by frequent distractions during encoding. Jackson and Smith, the ampersand between Jackson and Smith, comma 1999, all of that within parentheses at the end of the sentence. So if you just want to cite information that was found from different studies, you would use the citation within parentheses and use the ampersand between authors if you have two or more. If you're doing more of a theory or idea-based citation, where you want to talk about a theory that someone has developed, want to get into more specific detail about methodology, or want to discuss a lot of findings and the author's interpretation of the findings, you would use more of a researcher-focused type of citation. In this case, the date only goes within the parentheses, and often the author's name or the authors' names come at the start of a paragraph or start of a sentence, and you will use the word "and" to separate the author's names. So in this case, Jackson and Smith, 1999, the 1999 is in parentheses, and the word "and" separates the authors. With an innovative methodology, found memory to be hampered by frequent distractions during encoding. So if you want to particularly have, say, like many sentences that are coming from a study of one particular author or authors, you would cite them up front in the first sentence, and then as long as you keep talking about the study and it's clear that it's still Jackson and Smith's study, you would then be able to use this type of citation using more than one sentence, maybe even like half a paragraph or so, to discuss the findings of these particular authors. Now, if you have a study and it has three or more authors, the general rule is that you cite all of the authors the first time you use the material, but each time thereafter you use the abbreviation et al. So you only cite all of the authors once, and then you use the abbreviation each time you cite it again in the paper. So you're using the material more than once. In this example, learning can be fun, Smith, Chang, and Ruiz, 2008. If you use this citation anywhere else in the paper, it will now become Smith et al. 2008. And you would not cite all of the authors again. You only do that the first time. If you have 6 or more authors for a study that you're citing, you use et al. From the very first citation. That is, you never cite all of the authors' names. You use the abbreviated et al. Right from the get-go. So when you're making a list of all of your references, one thing to keep in mind is all of the authors are in a particular order, and that order has to be maintained. So if someone is a first author, second author, third author, you leave them in the order in which they are published in the paper. You never change around the order of the authors. But when you create your reference list, you alphabetize it so that the first author that comes first in the alphabet comes first in your reference list. So for example, in this case, Guzman and Jones, 2012, Guzman starts with G. You would place them ahead in the list of James because G comes before J in the alphabet. And if there was Abel and Abrahamson, then Abel would come before Guzman because A comes before G, etc., etc. So this is how you create your list for the reference page. So for homework, what you're going to do is please put all of the references for your project, you should have about 6 now, into an APA-style reference list and email that in through Blackboard for the homework. So you're going to take your 6 studies, you're going to put them into an APA-style reference list, and you are going to send them in for homework.